Welcome to the Economy and Politics show designed for robust conversations on economy, policies, and how it can improve household livelihoods. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. As Nigeria marks its 63rd independence anniversary, the focus of our conversation is what must be done to achieve a GDP of $1 trillion, as earmarked by this current administration in the next 8 years. With revenue challenges, declining investments, rising debt, rising cases of migration, also known as JAPA, weak fiscal and monetary policy frameworks, and the inability to fully utilize its hydrocarbons and solid minerals, Nigeria is facing an existential challenge. Joining me virtually to discuss Nigeria at 63, the journey towards a $1 trillion GDP, is Dr. Tope Fasua, the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs in the Vice President's Office, and Mr. Gospel Obele, the CEO of Streetnomics Limited. Thank you for joining our show.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Let me begin by asking you, Dr. Tope, we have 2 reforms already in place, which you will speak briefly to. I would like you, based on what you've been saying on the need to have homegrown solutions, to speak on how we can unlock economic growth with these solutions.
You mentioned the 2 policies, and you mentioned homegrown policies and homegrown ideas. Certainly, look, we formed the University College Ibadan about 74 years ago, almost 75 years ago. And we started going to university way back. Even before then, our people had been going to universities abroad. So, I mean, having homegrown solutions to our problems should not be a big deal. In fact, it's what should be the mainstream, that we should think for ourselves. All of this idea of cut and paste, because Adam Smith wrote it in 1786 or thereabout, therefore it must be relevant in Nigeria of today, with the demographics that we have, with all that has happened in terms of technology and co. And I mean, that is pulling us as well, and we are not ready to think for ourselves. That's a no. That doesn't work. Life does not work like that. So there are many things we can do for ourselves. So if we now look at homegrown solutions as, thinking for ourselves, knowing what variables drive our economics and so on, that's what exactly I mean by that. We have to know what variables drive our economics, what variables are relevant to us as Nigerians, given all our issues. Okay, for example, somehow we run a very divided society. People are divided on religious terms, on tribal terms, and so on. Do you know that's also an economic issue? When you're planning policy, you must know how the policy will be taken. You must know what different demographics are going to react to those policies. And that's what determines whether your policy will succeed or not. You cannot say, oh, we're not English people, we're not Scottish people, we're not Irish people. When they were making the theories that underpin Adam Smith, they had in mind the specifics of Irish and Scottish and, all those people and Welsh people. So, I mean, I think it's a shame that we would think that some of those policies will be relevant to us at this age and time. It's a big, big shame to those of us who went to school. And so talking specifically about the 2 policies that are driving a lot of things now, including inflation, it's clear. So there's a policy around the FX unification, quote and unquote, and how it has panned out. Like you said, it's been interpreted in different ways. The point is, some people sold the wrong narrative. If government says we are going to unify the rate, government can only unify the rates that it has control over, which is the official rate. Government cannot unify the rate, the black market rate. You cannot unify your own rate to the black market rate. You can only unify what you can control. Just like the other time, somebody said, "Oh, Nigerian government or CBN wanted to ban cryptocurrency or disappear." CBN is not in charge of cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency exists where it exists. So you can't control or determine the life of what you don't have control over. And that's exactly what has panned out. However, initially, I felt that, look, we could have done a little bit better in the management of that policy, because I think what happened, because of this same rhetoric, and I think there are some smart guys everywhere in Nigeria who make sure that things always work in their favor and they make a lot of money from it. We've seen companies declaring mega profit, record profits on the back of Naira devaluation. So those people are taking a bet on the Naira and they're cashing out. So they saw the whole idea that the black market was a reference rate, and so they needed to close look. Let me tell you
Yeah, the
something.
premium. Yeah.
Where we need to be going to, Otto, is that respectable, self-respecting news media should be wary and should be careful about reporting black market rates. Now, let me say, there's a black market in every country for foreign exchange. For those who are in the on the ground economy, they have a place where they get there, and that's what a black market is. That's what an illegal market is, an unofficial market. That's what it is. We know our issues there, but we cannot mainstream black market as the real rate. And that's what we have done. And so they traded up the official rates from maybe 461 or 651, wherever it was, and went up to the black market level at 740, 770. But what has happened? That market has now moved on to close to 1,000. And so according to what we hear on the streets, in time, it will be, almost impossible for a self-respecting, media house, whether you are an online media or mainstream or traditional media, to just open your mouth and say the black market rate is X and X. Because somebody will tell you, okay, you know what, take me to that black market. It's supposed to be an underground market. What has happened to us in Nigeria, that our sense of propriety has disappeared. And everybody's talking black market. And so we've become even so quite entitled to the dollar. I hear things like, there's dollar scarcity, the scarcity of dollar. Listen, we don't produce dollars here. So you cannot say there's something is scarce. You will only get as much dollar as what you sell. And in one forum recently, I actually did the analogy. I can tell you 20 things right now where I see it, 20 things that we purchase in the billion, and billions of dollars. And we have only two things officially that we export that's in the billions of dollars, which is petroleum and gas. And when you see our petroleum and gas number, which is about 57 billion dollars, only 30% is ours. If you look at the LNG structure, you know that Nigeria is only a part owner. So that's one, and fertilizer, those are the only two things we export. But in the billion rate, we have 4 billion worth of wheat, 1 billion worth of sugar, 1 billion worth of milk, 1 billion worth of all sorts of things, fish. Not to talk of the petroleum that's our biggest import today, petroleum and all the diesel oil and all of those stuff. I can tell you different things, pharmaceuticals, steel, and what have you, that we even cars, we import cars for
Doctor.
$4 billion every year.
Yes, so doctor, I just wanted to say that you talked about the media now. The BDCs, the Bureau de Changes, are known and recognized, even though it's taken some time to integrate them into the foreign exchange market, but that's the rate that is always being paid. So I understand your concerns, but of course,
BDCs are not black market. However, somehow in Nigeria, the BDCs will tell you they're selling money at a black market rate. If the central bank should be able to control the BDCs and say, listen, the rate between the BDC and the bank should be very, very slim in terms of the difference. Again, let me tell you one thing that we tried to sell, which I think was very, very wrong-headed, was the idea that, this idea that there'll be one rate. No, let me tell you, in the same company, in the same BDC, in the same bank, there are different rates even abroad. Maybe people, I don't know, maybe people don't have experience, but there's a rate for you to just transfer to different places if you wanted to transfer. There's a rate for you if you wanted to do international trade business. It may not be more than 1% or 2% different. Then there's a difference between the rates in the bank and the rates in the BDC. It may not be more than 1 or 2%. That is the way it works. So somehow we saw this idea that we want one magic rate, and look at where we are today. So it is what it is.
Okay, then definitely there's a lot of work to do from the banking side. But let's go to Gospel. You are part of our great exports in the world. I mean, recently the government launched the Talent Export Program. Do you think this is a game changer in leveraging our human capital and deepening our engagement with the diaspora?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on the call. So for me, the first thing I would probably want to think about is to what end, what's the objective, the ground level objective of this policy move? What is made for diasporans or Africans or Nigerians rather, who have probably left the country to, for different reasons best known to them. So what's that singular core why as to, as to why a talent who left Nigeria would want to buy into this policy by the federal government? So for me, it's really, really trying to understand that there has to be much more around this policy options that the government is trying to introduce. Is the end game to raise FX
Yeah, very
I
important.
think that the priorities of these policies are being channeled wrongly. First and
Mm.
foremost, there are lots of low-hanging fruits where you have loads of talents who are generating effects for themselves, and generating good revenue. Take, for instance, 56% of the economy is services driven. But right now,
Yes.
Nigeria doesn't have a comprehensive services sector
Mm.
policy.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of global trade in 2022, for instance, digital services was at the top in terms of representation to the pool of globally traded goods and services. Digital services are 15% more than the global goods sector. So just to tell you
Mm.
that the services sector is rising. 56% of the Nigerian economy is services based. So
Yeah.
if you look at that traction in terms of trends and pattern,
Mm.
it's a low hanging fruit for any intentional institution who wants to take advantage of its talent. You understand what I'm trying to say? And
Yes.
then you also want to think about the FX dynamics to these things. And also, I think trying to border heavily on the market that's constantly on the move, like the diaspora Nigerians or Nigerians in diaspora, is, I mean, you need to have a stronger reason why an average Nigerian in diaspora would be willing to connect to such a policy. For many
Okay,
of them, they're still
Gospel.
trying to settle in. Yeah.
Okay, Gospel, let me come in there. Now, in your network, and of course, you have the opportunity where you are, you
Yeah.
interact with a lot of people across the globe. India is
Yeah.
being described as an example. When you look at India, they have a very strong diaspora base. So Nigeria is trying to look at, okay, let's begin to leverage our human capital. So what is a good example we can take from what India has done and China with the diaspora programs that enable talent management and also create value for economy? Because this quest to be a 1 trillion GDP, there's huge opportunity to human capital. If you can intervene.
I think it's very ambitious.
Hmm.
Human capital has a huge role to play in those projections. However, I don't think this is the right move right now. If you look at the case of India, for instance, I mean, I live in the UK, so I understand where the Asians come in context to talent development and all that. They're very communal in how they even deal with themselves, in overseas markets like the UK. So if you look at an Asian there, the Asian probably has an identifiable community that protects his or her interest, facilitates their access to market and settlement in that host country, and also within those blocks of communities, they can do more for their home country. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. But right now, for the Nigerian diaspora, we don't even have that. Nigerians work as individuals in the diaspora market. A couple of people within this new migration wave are trying to set up communities that can bring Nigerians together, professionally support them, even in settlement and all that. And that may be, the forward-thinking approach to executing this policy that the government wants to take on. However, within the context of this policy, I don't see any approach to galvanize or set up diaspora communities that can serve as, input sources to take on, to drive this policy in terms of its innovation and what it can really yield the Nigerian economy. So I think in terms of structure, community, and all of that, India and China has probably even progressed way further than we have done. And it's also enabling do not forget also that even locally in India, you have a very strong emphasis on the technology sector and the health sector. So they picked two policies that it majored on, and the world knows India to be like a soft skills when it comes to tech hub. A place you can easily outsource your technology, a place you can easily also outsource healthcare, for some. But Nigeria doesn't have that. All right, we don't even have one sector we can boast of to say this is our home advantage, that we can strongly link communities in the diaspora, Nigerians in the diaspora with, and say that we're exporting talent and earning effects from it. So I think we need to do more house cleaning, both for ourselves here in Nigeria and even for the Nigerians in diaspora to even take off any policy of such.
So, Dr. Tope, I want to ask you something that's very fundamental, because any government that comes on board, like you see in the US or the UK, you tend to understand, okay, this is economic philosophy, this is where they're going. Are they welfarist capitalists, or are they pure capitalists, or are they tending to be a bit in the middle line? So you're in government now, and you know how important as an economist philosophy is, ideologies are in driving policy. What you're in this government, how would you describe the economic philosophy of this administration, and how is that a pivot also to achieving this $1 trillion GDP?
Oh, okay. So very, very interesting. And A very interesting question. The other policy I couldn't speak more about earlier on was the fuel subsidy removal, which
Yes.
clearly was something that needed to go because of, if not for anything else, because of the what we understand to be frauds that happen in that sector around the issue of just how much fuel do we use on a daily basis, and what happens to the importation process and what have you, and how much escapes through smuggling through the borders and so on. So that needed to go. So if you ask me, what's the thinking, what's the economic thinking or ideology of this government, I probably may only be able to say somewhere in the middle. Because if you look at the first few policies the government took, they were clearly neoliberal policies. For subsidy removal is something the IMF and the World Bank would always knock us about. And now we've managed to try to do it. And of course, it resulted in a 250% increase in the price of fuel. And we say, listen, let's walk away from this so that we can free up money and know that every time we're selling this crude oil, the money that's coming in actually is money that we can spend. And if you look at the unification of the dollar, it's also clearly a liberal policy. But when you stretch it, what I know about President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and from all his speeches, all his write-ups, and I've read quite almost everything he's written and listened to almost everything he said. His thinking is left of center. Equally, the vice president of Nigeria, Senator Kashim, he's also Kashim Shettima. He's also a left of center thinker. From the way he ran Borno State, these are people who care deeply about the people. And so I think that in doing those few neoliberal policies, they felt let's assuage the feelings of these financiers and these neoliberal thinkers that run the economy globally. And let's also make it plain that look, we're business friendly and we understand what economics is about at that level. But but subsequently, they're now thinking about, what, having taken that decision, we now have to gravitate very quickly to assuaging the pains of the people. And I believe that that's the best thing. I would always tell people that, look, the isms are dead. Capitalism, socialism. Go to US, where many of our people in diaspora live. US is meant to be a capitalist country, but they have some of the most robust social systems in the world. They have food stamps and all of those stuff. They have Obamacare, which is major, and all of that. Go to the UK. The biggest business in the UK is the NHS. That's the National Health Service. It's owned by the government.
Subsidized healthcare.
It employs the most people. But you go to China, where China is supposed to be a socialist country, but it's more capitalist than anywhere else these days. So it's about common sense. Like Deng Xiaoping said, doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white, so long as it catches mice. So whatever kind of ideology you want to use, you make sure that at the end of the day, it makes the lives of your people better. And it continues to, guarantee for you a better future for your country, for the people of your country. And I think that's what it should be. Is it delivering on the goods? So it's a bit early, okay, however, to judge
it's a bit early,
the philosophy of this government, the philosophy will be determined by the results. But so let's give the government some time, maybe a year, a couple of years, we will see exactly what have we achieved with any kind of idea. But I would always say that we should take the best from capitalism and take the best from socialism or any other ism, call it pragmatism, and see how it works, especially if it works to make the lives of our people better.
All right, so I hear you clearly when you say left or center, but the most important thing is that we must galvanize the people and we must balance economic models. But for you, Gospel, coming to the monetary policy level, we're now seeing a CBN governor, Dr. Yemi Cardoso, shifting from direct development finance, and he says he's going to focus on monetary policy interventions that support growth. He said clearly that his role will be to bring monetary policy interventions that complement the efforts of reforms and policies that is geared towards achieving the $1 trillion GDP in the next 8 years. For you, what are your expectations, Gospel?
I think I really love how Yemi is thinking. And that's because, as much as the central bank plays a huge role in development financing, I also think that in the past few years, the Apex institution have gotten its hands into many aspects of quote-unquote development financing that it's lost its core. the core areas of price stability, the core area of enabling growth with monetary policies and all that. If you look at it very clearly, many of its policies have actually ended up hurting stakeholders in the real sector than even direct fiscal policies. You get what I mean? So think of all the FX policies we've had recently prior to the emergence of Yemi Cardoso. They've all hurt real sector players, small businesses, households, and you cannot generate growth on those grounds if you're not mobilizing efforts enough to support these local institutions. So I agree with that train of thought that the priority right now shouldn't be development financing, but rather enabling growth. However, my encouragement to expectation will be that the body language I'm seeing looks as though there is a strong relationship between the apex governor and the current president, and that's a very there is a relationship, and that's a very good sign, because I personally think that going forward into Nigeria's monetary policy system, especially within the short to mid-term, many of our challenges need a very strong collaborative effort between the monetary and fiscal authorities, right? And the catch for me will be, how are you building or mobilizing that collaboration across, designing of policies to start with, number one, communicating these policies, because you don't want a situation where Cardoso announces a policy and President Tinubu comes to announce a policy that's counterproductive.
Yeah. For you, Dr. Tope, I know that, yes, we press for time. What are those top 5 sectors you see Nigeria must scale or leverage to achieve this $1 trillion GDP in the next 8 years?
There'll always be the talk about power being central to everything else, okay? So yeah, power sector is key. But however, I still want a very empirical study around the effects that it will have. If we have light, will it be cheaper than it is right now? Can most of our people afford the light that's generated by the discos and gencos and all of those guys these days, being private sector players who are, all with an eye on profit making and all of that? Or what should we do?
That's very important.
Yes. But the petroleum sector is still very key because, yes, it's still what we have and we can leverage on it big time. And, it still has prospect. Crude oil is not disappearing anytime soon. Even though, we know what's going on with batteries and so on. And in Nigeria right now, your state, in Nasarawa state, about 7 states, there's a lot going on around lithium. Everything. I think it was in Cross River recently. There was something about people stealing titanium and so on. We have all of these things, and they're there. In Jos area, we have barite, we have columbite, tantalite. The solid mineral sector contributed less than 1.2% of our GDP in 2021. They contributed only, in terms of revenue, they generated only 193 billion in a 212 trillion naira economy. So basically, that sector is totally unaccounted. And I must also tell you that sector, most of our exports of solid minerals goes to China, 48%. There's nothing that goes to Europe. Nothing goes to South America. Almost everything goes to China. Then you see Malaysia, Indonesia, and some of those Asian countries. And so I also see this as a growth sector that we could actually begin to look at. You know what I'm saying? Apart from the softer side of things, for example, education. Look, if you give us 6 years straight of serious and continuous education of the young people of this country, those 10 million children that are carrying bowls everywhere, moving around out of school, doing conductor work and all of that, 6 years of serious training, this country will be forever transformed. Because when you educate a child, you are building the mind and enabling them to add a lot more value to society. So there are also those sectors to consider, including reorientating the minds of our people.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tope, for those perspectives. Now, Gospel, let me allow you ramp up with 1 minute, 30 seconds, if you can, and I trust you can, land your point on the CBN and the top 5 sectors that can power us to $1 trillion GDP in 8 years.
Yeah, thank you very much, Otto. Yeah, so what I think top 5 sectors would look like in terms of powering will be, number one, the services sector, of course. and that would be digital services, maximizing the low-hanging fruits we have there and institutionalizing processes for young people to ensure that, let's assume for every $100 you get from a transaction, 15 or $10 goes to the government. There's a proper, pipeline for reward of talent and access to market. I mean, do not worry, once that pipeline is structured and ordered properly, what you have is you will have more opportunities for young people opening up. That's number one, digital services. Number two, I think agri-processing. Emphasis on agri-processing, because right now, agriculture is 90% crop production, and that's really irrelevant, quote and unquote, if it's not being processed. So you want to go into agri-processing and make it creative and forward-thinking enough to encourage lots of young people to play inside in it. Another sector I think would really, really help in terms of facilitating that would be the creative sector. And that's because of the old, take for instance, the old Afrobeat genre, traveling around the world right now. And even our cosmetics industry, nail services, spa, medical, and all that, anything creative sector as a block would go a long way to drive the GDP significantly. So I think those are top three sectors, in my own opinion, and the central bank should probably look towards maximizing the collaborative effort that Cardoso and Tinubu can bring to the table to move us closer to that goal of a $1 trillion GDP.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Tope Fasua, Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs in the Vice President's Office, and also Gospel Obele, Mr. Gospel Obele, CEO, Streetnomics Limited. Thank you for this impactful conversation, looking at Nigeria at 63, the journey towards a $1 trillion GDP. Thank you once again for the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
To all Nigerians, happy Independence Anniversary once again, and we wish you all the best this period. To our viewers, if you want to get further insights on this conversation, visit the ProShare website displayed on the screen and follow the social media platforms to engage. I have an update for you. ProShare is launching its Tier 1 banking report. It is comprehensive, robust, and a must-read. Follow our websites to get all the updates. Till we come your way again, enrich yourself with the knowledge of socio-economic developments around you, because it is a wise thing to do. Thank you for watching. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong, and bye for now.